Greetings, programs, and welcome to UBOAT, or to put it another way, welcome to me trying to kickstart my brain back into video making mode, because I've not been so great at that this last week. This is an early access game, which I normally shy away from. I've featured one or two early access games in the past, but this one is kind of in my wheelhouse, so to speak. It looks interesting in that it's both got a kind of World War II naval theme, and it's also basically a crew management game. And you quite possibly have seen some coverage of this on other channels also, because this was a key that just got sent to me out of the blue. I didn't request it or anything, and I suspect they've been doing this with a lot of YouTubers and streamers to try and raise the profile of the game. And to be fair, I think it's a pretty decent game from what I've played so far. It's very much in the vein of FTL or Bomber Crew in terms of being a crew management game rather than some kind of hardcore sub-simulator like the Silent Hunter series. So if you're expecting this to be a Silent Hunter style game, you're going to be a bit disappointed, but you can still do quite a lot of things yourself. I mean, you can just let the game do it for you to some extent, in terms of things like plotting the course of targets and stuff like that, but you can also have more of a hand in that yourself as the player, because it does have a rather nice little feature in that, well, let's load it up and I will show you. So this is definitely an early access game. Like the core mechanics that are there, I think work reasonably well. The concept of the game is pretty solidly there. Some of the actual like mechanics might change over time. The balance of certain things will definitely change over time, and there's a couple of things that are just straight up, you know, placeholders or unfinished at the moment. But the most obvious thing at the moment is that, yeah, it's pretty buggy. It does have a tendency to crash and produce graphical glitches and things like that. So if anything like that happens during the course of this recording, yeah, just bear that in mind. It's very, very definitely an early access game. But compared to some early access games, it is actually quite playable at the moment. You just have to remember to save often. Otherwise, you might end up losing quite a lot of time on whatever it is you've been doing. Now, having said it's buggy, they are actually pushing out patches on a pretty regular basis as well. I think in the week or so since I have been sent this, or is it a little bit longer ago? I think the week or so I've had it installed, I have seen them put out, I think, 3 patches in that time. So yeah, they do seem to be fairly actively working on stomping on the bugs at the moment, and presumably they have some kind of that dreaded word, a roadmap about adding features that might not be in there at the moment. One of the things I did read, and at the moment it is just a Type 7C U-boat that you play with. One of the things I did read was that when they were trying to get this going on Kickstarter, which I don't think they succeeded with, I think they fell short of their goal and chose to go into the early access route instead. But they wanted to also have a Type 9 U-boat available as well, because of all the classes of U-boat, there were only actually about 3 or 4 that were kind of combat classes. They had quite a few experimentals. I mean, the Type 10s were purely supply boats. They had like some of the latter classes of boats where they ordered a bunch of them and then they were then cancelled, and so there were all these kind of like up to what's the was it the Type 21 was the very late war electric one, and they only actually got 2 of them into service before the war ended. But yeah, there were quite a few different classes, but in terms of the ones that actually were combat vessels that saw combat in any numbers, there weren't that many of them. There's only about 3 or 4, and of those the Type 7 was by far the most numerous. So this is your U-boat, U-97, which was an actual U-boat. I don't know what was special about them choosing that particular one to, you know, represent U-boats in the game. But yeah, you immediately see that this is it's a 3D game. Unlike, say, Bomber Crew, it is a lot more kind of realistic. It's not nearly as stylized. You don't have a chibi U-boat as you have a chibi Lancaster in Bomber Crew. But much like Bomber Crew, however, you zoom in a bit and you get this kind of cutaway view. And actually, the animation for the cutaway view is quite good, I think. But I did say there was something a bit different about that about this game. So not only do you get this cutaway view where you can see what your crew are doing and issue commands and tell them to do various things, but you actually get a first-person view as well. And when you're starting a game, you can even have an option where you play the entire game in first-person view and take command of the officers. Now, it's not just the officers. There are various ordinary, what would they be, ratings? Able seamen? I don't know what you would call them exactly. And you can assign them under the officers to do various things to help with the efficiency of various tasks. And depending on what you're having them do, it will help to varying degrees. Some things you don't get any benefit from assigning crew members. Other things it helps quite a lot. So that's one of the aspects of the game, is managing the crew, making sure that your crew is deployed to the best possible use at any given moment. But as at the moment we're just sat in port, nobody is assigned to anybody, and there's not a lot going on. So what we need to do is we need to actually get some kind of mission. Now, there is a sort of limited variety at the moment, but there are various things that can happen on different missions. So there is an element of randomization there, much like FTL and Bomber Crew. I don't know if this has a particular end game as such at the moment. What's the name of that other submarine game? You know, the one that Jingles plays and Jive Turkey, that one, where it basically has a kind of dynamic campaign based on the missions that you do, like how you perform on the missions, and you can end up with the different outcomes at the end of the campaign based on how you've done as a player. There's nothing like that in at the moment. It's possible that's something that they plan to do, but at the moment you just choose from one of 3 different randomly generated missions, and if you reload the game it'll generate different ones, and they have different difficulty levels, but the different difficulty levels don't always seem to correspond necessarily with how hard it will actually be. When it's just pure patrol missions, and at the moment it has just generated 3 patrol missions, the only real thing the difficulty seems to immediately pertain to is how far you have to travel. But it could be that there are higher probabilities of certain things happening based on the actual difficulty level that you choose. And what we'll do is we'll choose the high difficulty level, and we'll see if anything special comes out of that. But it's entirely possible that it will just be a patrol where literally nothing happens and I run into no enemy convoys, and that's that. One thing that this game does do, which is probably highly accurate to real life, is that you can have rather long stretches of not a lot happening, punctuated by moments of oh god, we're all going to die. Which is, yeah, that's, not unlike being in the real life military in some capacity. In most capacities, one imagines. There are some other things you can do in port. You've got recruitment, where you can get new officers and also manage your existing crew. I can't hire any officers. I can get new able seamen, but there doesn't seem to be any particular like the regular crew don't seem to accrue experience. Only officers seem to get experience, which unlocks various skills. But you also need officers to research stuff. This is how research works in this game. I've got 2, in fact, officers assigned to researching at the moment, and I can't show you the map, but it basically gives you a map, and you send them off to various places, but we can see what they are in fact researching. So improved accumulators, which is basically extended battery life for when I am using my electric motors underwater, and also a radar detector, which is used to give early warning of approaching patrol aircraft. Because if a short Sunderland comes at you and starts trying to drop depth charges on you, that's no laughing matter. Anyway, we have our orders, and I was also going to show the warehouse is where you resupply and also upgrade your ship. So yeah, but I won't bother showing that, it's not very interesting. So what we'll do is we'll set a course to the patrol sector, which is in this case around the Irish Sea and the West Atlantic. Or what I could do, in fact, because I have this unlocked, is use this checkpoint, and we'll see if it'll actually let me. Do I right click on it? Oh, there we go. So yeah, basically you can unlock kind of fast travel points around the map, so we can do that rather than sail out on our sails. Have to do it, not quite in real time, because you can fast forward time a bit, but presumably that skips over the possibility of has it put us there already? Yes, it has. That skips over the possibility of running into enemy patrols. So we're here already. We kind of have instantly spawned where we need to be, and yeah, for patrol missions it is exactly what it sounds like. You just patrol a certain set distance, and what we'll do is we'll travel up to the west coast of Scotland. You can see where the enemy bases are. I mean, things are a bit scaled down in this game overall. The actual crew complement is, I think, like half what it would be in real life. I read from the developer, I can't remember where it was. It was on the Steam community thing anyway. That they tested various levels of having extra crew, but because they've gone for this method of having actual crewmen, the pathing was basically producing traffic jams, and so they settled on, I think it's like 25 at most that you can have. It's around 25, and that's kind of, in terms of both performance and not having massive traffic jams, that seems to be about the best that they can manage. But also things like, the various ports and air bases are rather spread out. It's kind of confined to the major ones. So you've got Portsmouth but not Exeter, you've got Cardiff. We've only got a couple of actual RAF air bases. Where are we? Liverpool, Belfast, Edinburgh, but not Glasgow, oddly enough, and Lyoness, which is the kind of shoreside naval facility for Scapa Flow. There's also one or two all the way over on, here we go, Halifax and Sydney. And there's a couple of American ones as well, but only two, Boston and New Jersey. I don't know if the game encompasses, like, there is a whole world map. Maybe at some point they have in mind there will be a DLC for like the Indian Ocean, for example, because there were U-boat patrols in the Indian Ocean, although we think of that as being much more the province of the Japanese Navy. And no doubt they've got all kinds of ideas of potential DLC, but for now it is just, the Type 7 U-boats in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. So let's set ourselves on our way. I don't know if we've actually... I think this is a bug at the moment. If you use the fast travel points, even though it says it's going to consume fuel and some of your food, it doesn't actually. Although it might have consumed some food, in fact. It might just be fuel. Not sure. But what we can do to conserve fuel now that we are here is assign some crew to our engineer, which will reduce fuel usage. And we can even get our... where are we? is this our bosun? Yes, our chief bosun on the navigating table, which is necessary to make sure that you can keep your position, because it's possible to lose your position and then have to re-establish it, at which point you don't know which direction you're heading in exactly. You don't have, I mean, you can still look at the map, but you don't have any kind of position markers or anything, so you can end up having to spend a while re-establishing it, and that can all be time wasted when you're supposed to be following missions or whatever. So it's important to try and keep an idea where you are, but also that adds a cumulative bonus to your fuel usage as well, so you can actually get up to minus 50% on your fuel usage. But fuel usage, and therefore your range, also heavily depends on exactly how fast you're travelling. So we're getting a radio transmission from headquarters. This can quite often happen when you're doing one of these patrol missions. So we'll click on that, and our radio / hydrophones guy will actually decode this for us. You can rename the officers, by the way. There is like a whole crew customization screen, but at the moment it really doesn't like it if you rename them. It caused some issues, so I can do things like change the hats they're wearing, and I seem to have gotten rid of his hat entirely. But, alright, captain's cap. Some are locked to crew positions. Only the captain can wear the captain's cap. And I can also change the face type and change the kind of beard and all the rest of it. And this is where you find the skill tree as it is at the moment as well. Although this is clearly a bit of a work in progress. And there's also this promote button. It's not entirely clear if that does anything at the moment. That might also just be a placeholder. But if you try and change the name, which is obviously a feature of games like Bomber Crew and FTL as well, and it would be quite nice if you were streaming this and you could change the name to viewers and whatever, then it causes the game to have conniptions at the moment. So sadly I can't do that. I did have a go at I renamed them for characters in a BBC radio sitcom called The Navy Lark, which I don't know if there's going to be many people that will even have vaguely heard of that, but that was amusing for all of 5 minutes, and then I realised it was making the game be very unhappy. So we have to find and sink a specific ship. This is a dynamic order that we've been given whilst we're on patrol. We don't have to do this. We will get a really big bonus if we do it. This is a secondary condition, but we're going to try. However, it does look like, and these just randomly spawn, and sometimes they'll spawn heading away from you. And in one case, I had to travel halfway across the Atlantic Ocean to catch up with a marked convoy. But I had the fuel to do it. It's just it was rather time consuming. Other times you'll get lucky and they'll spawn on a bearing that is in fact heading towards you. In this case it seems to have spawned stationary in Belfast Harbour, or else maybe just coming out of Belfast Harbour, but no, I think it is in fact stationary in Belfast Harbour. So we are in effect going to have to go and get close to a harbour, some of which have their own static defences. So you can't approach on the surface, but even if they don't have their own static defences, most of them have their own patrol craft. The only one so far where that wasn't the case, where I discovered I was just able to saunter up in broad daylight and kill everything without having to worry about any kind of retaliation, was for some reason Alexandria. And it's quite possible that that port just wasn't fully finished or fleshed out at that point, that wasn't entirely intentional. If you're wondering, yes, it does take a while to scroll around. There's no kind of small version of the map that lets you click around a bit easier or a bit quicker than having to scroll painfully back and forth. Now this would take a while doing this at... well, I don't think this is quite real time. I think the time seems to progress in 10-minute increments, and it's like a minute or two for every 10-minute increment, so it's sped up a bit anyway, but it would still take a while to travel the kind of distances that we're talking about. So this is where the fast travel comes in, and It still can take a little while, especially if you're traversing thousands of kilometers at a time. But it's a lot quicker than the alternative. There's also 2 different modes of fast travel. We'll actually get to see when we're a bit closer inshore. If you're close to any generated anything, so whether it be shoreline or ships or anything like that, it automatically dumps you back into air quotes real time, although it's not quite real time, as I've said. And at that point you do have still another fast travel mode available, but this is, it's actually, it differentiates it. It calls that fast travel and this time compression, but it's effectively the same thing. But because this is, I'm guessing it's to do with, because this is open ocean, and it'll be like Kerbal Space Program. It'll kind of generate different spaces, different areas, depending on whether you're in open ocean or whether it actually then has to start loading in terrain and ship models and things like that. That'll be why there's 2 different methods of fast travel. So as we're getting closer, we're going to have to start worrying about aerial patrols. One thing that you want to research fairly early on is the ability to use the snorkel, or to install a snorkel on your U-boat, because a lot of missions without it are really quite tricky otherwise. You only have a fairly limited amount of, when you start completely unupgraded, a fairly limited amount of battery life. And in fact, talking of research, we just finished some research right there. We'll wait till they're both finished. That one's about to be finished as well. So it makes certain missions really difficult, because the snorkel, it's still more visible than just using a periscope whilst you're at periscope depth, but you can only use the electric engines otherwise. And once the power runs out, you have to surface. Whereas if you can at least get to snorkel depth, you can run the diesel engines, recharge the electrics. It also brings in fresh air for the crew, and it makes certain things a lot easier. So we have unlocked 2 things that I'll be able to get install the next time I go to a port. There's various different types. There's things that unlock, for instance, a new type of torpedo. I'll send my engineer off to research that. That's only going to take a day. And, well, this is what I was previously researching, a radar detector. Pardon me. Some research has multiple levels at the moment. I imagine this might get a bit more added to it as the game goes on, but I think a lot of the research stuff is there already. Now, ordinarily, research is tied to, like it actually says, you need a radio man. In this case, it is a radio man I'm sending, but this radio man has a skill, which means they can be sent on any kind of research mission, which is why I pulled them off the ship. That's why I only have 5 officers at the moment, when I can have a maximum of 7. I haven't had any more officers available for recruitment. So there's that element of crew management as well. You might need to pull some officers off the ship in order to go and research things to increase the effectiveness of your ship. Or boat. Boats are, submarines are referred to as boats, right? I believe that's the convention. So once I start getting a bit closer to Belfast, I will drop down to periscope depth and we will snorkel. And I also, we've got somebody on the radio at the moment. I think that is also our radar detector that that I have recently installed. Now at the moment we do have, this is one of the core mechanics of the game is discipline, which is kind of, I almost wish they split it in half and have kind of like maybe a morale, some kind of morale meter that's a lot closer to what we have with Paradox games and the stability system. And maybe positive morale would have positive effects on the effectiveness of your crew, negative effects once you're in, minus morale, and then some kind of separate tension bar for times when you are under attack or at action stations. But at the moment it's all kind of lumped into one bar, and it's a little clunky as a mechanic. This is one of the things I think does need refining, but it sort of works. It basically does what they do need it to do. It's just, I think it could work better. Now we're approaching under the daylight hours. At the moment I'm basically at full visibility. There's a little bit of cloud cover reducing my visibility. But for the most part, the stuff we run into, we don't really have to worry about noise. It tends to be the larger ships that have any kind of noise to worry about. Now if I go and look, and this is, again, there's various things that you can do yourself. So this is the commander who's just kind of automatically spotting for me. And it's just flat ocean at the moment. There's not a lot to see there. But, you know, the identification book gives you some idea of what's in the game at the moment. So you have destroyer size, you've got a couple of different types of freighter. You can run into other submarines. It's rare, but it does happen. I've had a couple of missions where I've been on patrol and you get told to go and rendezvous with another submarine to transfer medical supplies or repair supplies. You also get various different kinds of corvette and armed trawler escort. There's the Illustrious, which is something you meet in the tutorial mission, but I've not run into any sign of bigger ships, bigger warship groups, just whilst playing the game otherwise so far. And then it also lists the Nelson, so presumably, even if it isn't in there at the moment, there is a notion that you can meet bigger ships. And one of the quirks of the game, having said it's stripped down earlier on, convoys are unescorted. So you don't, I think the most I've seen is like 5 transports in an at-sea convoy, and there is no kind of convoy escorts going on at all. That might be something that gets added in later, because at the moment it makes attacking convoys extremely easy. You don't have to worry even slightly about getting attacked by anything unless you happen to be otherwise close to a port where there are patrol craft. So we're going to go down to periscope depth, and you'll see everyone coming under the coming down into the ship. Apart from this guy who's decided to hang out. This is a bug that I have noticed more than a couple of times. This guy's just going to hang out on the top deck on the conning tower even when we go underwater, and it will do him absolutely no harm whatsoever because reasons. So as we're going underwater, we'll stick our technical guy on the radio room, and we will also want to put up the snorkel so we can keep using the diesel engine. The electric engine, apart from anything else, isn't as powerful, so you don't move as fast when you're using it. And what we can also do is potentially change the lighting to silent running mode, which will use less oxygen, but that's not really going to be an issue. There's also a red lighting mode for nighttime, but I don't think that gives any actual crew effects at the moment. The blue light and the normal white light are the only ones that seem to have any kind of effects on them. So that's taken our visibility down from around 90% to 9%. And what we're basically going to do is creep up on Belfast, and I really hope that we are going to find the ship that we need actually in Belfast Harbour, and it's not somehow bugged out and like stuck it in the middle of the land, because stuff like that could potentially happen. I wouldn't put it past the game to bug out a bit in that regard. Probably the weirdest bug I've seen so far is a port literally following me It's a bit like the old launch clamp bug in Kerbal Space Program, where you'd launch, and for some reason the launch clamps would follow you up because they would stay in the rendered box that you were moving through. And it basically, you know, the exact same thing was happening clearly with the port model. The port object was staying in the rendered box that you were in at that moment. Which is, you know, a bit weird, a port stalking you, following you out to sea, but anyway. So what we'll do, I think, is we'll have a little jump cut here because this is going to take a while to approach. This game can take a while at times. In fact, we've been going for almost half an hour already, and anyone that's played one of the, you know, the old Silent Hunter games is probably thinking, oh, half an hour, that's nothing. But if you've only played the likes of FTL or Bomber Crew, then yeah, the engagements tend to be a lot shorter in that. So this is much more of a slow-paced game, definitely. So we're getting pretty close at this point. You can see all the... I didn't maybe explain this very well, but the crew, they're all doing their own thing more or less, but you can specifically order them to do different tasks. But generally, whatever role you assign them, they will go and do a specific thing based on that role as their primary task. But some roles have secondary tasks as well. But yeah, we're nearly in sight of Belfast Harbour. There don't seem to be any patrol craft around. There was one or two contacts up there, but it does seem like that we are just creeping in more or less unmolested. So this has been comparatively easy so far. But of course, once we start firing torpedoes, it's going to be a little more obvious that we're actually here. Now, what we need to do is find a specific type of ship. And I'm not seeing any Empire Tower class freighters. And mostly warships, in fact. There's one freighter. But it has told me I'm in the right area to find the ship I need to sink. So unless it's lurking, I don't even know, like it might be lurking here, or it was definitely giving a marker on land, and it's popped up and said you're now in the right area, but it's not actually at the port. So it's possible this mission is a little bit buggy. What we will nonetheless do, however, is demonstrate how one fires torpedoes at things. Now you can, in fact we can stop this being at fast forward. There we go, there's the port over there. You can basically have this happen hands off, more or less. You can select whoever your spotting officer is. Now the hydrophones guy can't give me any information because these are all docked ships. They're not generating any engine noise. If they were, he could give me targeting information, but as it is, it's purely visual targeting information I have to rely on. So it's my commanding officer, and what I would do is, say, select that flower class. So let's see, it'll be that one there. And he will now automatically, for me, calculate the course needed for a torpedo to strike that ship. But you can do this yourself manually. If I go into manual mode and hope that this hasn't completely bugged out. It's having a moment. I did mention the game was a teeny tiny bit unstable, right? Oh, there we go. Right, maybe if I... No, I can't tell him to uncheck that at this point. Okay. Yeah, apparently it doesn't like it if you've started them automatically looking, calculating torpedo trajectory. and then switching into manual mode. Okay, we learned a thing. It really doesn't like it when you do that. Yeah, okay, it freezes up. So, I was going to demonstrate that you could do it manually, and then the game was like, nope. Okay. Bit rough around the edges. I think what I can do actually is manually assign him to... there we go. Basically switch stations, go back to the right station, and actually then manual mode. Right, this time it should be okay with letting me... I have done this! You know, when I'm not recording, and it works fine. Apparently this time it just doesn't want to work. Should we try the other periscope? Let's try sending him to the other periscope. Manual mode. Right. Now we can... I haven't used this periscope much, so how does one filters zoom? Do we need to be further up, higher in the water? Do I just need to keep pressing the W key to breach the surface, or is that like... I don't know. I've only really used the attack periscope rather than the observation periscope. Before playing this game, I wasn't even aware that there were different kinds of periscopes, but you know, it's a thing I learned. Let's actually... Oh God, what about if I try leave position? Let's try doing this fully manually in first person view. And use that, and nope. Okay, well, we're not doing this today apparently. I was going to demonstrate how you could look at look through the periscope and plot your own torpedo courses and things, but that's not happening right now. Yeah. Okay. Never mind. Early access. So the ship we need isn't actually here. I'm going to search around a little bit, see if I can find it. Presumably it's somewhere else. I really hope it's somewhere else and it hasn't spawned in the middle of the land, because that would be really quite awkward. So let's search a little further down the coast. So yeah, once again I'm going to fast forward, and it's still going to take a little time, so we'll do another little jump forwards from here. So a thing I failed to spot is that, yeah, it must have spawned at Belfast or near Belfast and has basically travelled down to Cardiff. So, yeah, there wasn't any way for me to intercept it in time, essentially. I mean, I suppose I could have travelled along... Where was I at the point where we got the orders? But I didn't know it was going to go that way at that point. I had no clue... as to which direction it would be travelling. So it does seem like it probably spawned. It wasn't stuck on land, but it's travelled down to Cardiff docks. Now you'd think that would mean I'd have failed the mission, but even though it has gotten to its destination, you can still just go and sink it, or when it is in the docks, and it will still count for the bonus part of this particular mission. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to travel down to Cardiff, and hopefully this time actually get to demonstrate sinking things with torpedoes, but I still don't think I'm going to get to do it manually, because that just isn't working right now at all. I don't know why. Maybe if I reloaded the game. I might do that, in fact, before we go into Cardiff docks. Just reload the game and hope that that does the trick. Sometimes it does. Sometimes even just... in fact, I think it's happened once in this video already. Sometimes the UI elements just disappear and you have to go into free cam view, and that seems to get it working correctly again. But yeah, why that's not working, I don't know. There's a lot of rough edges in this game. A lot of rough edges. So here we are in the Bristol Channel. We're just about where we need to be. I have been close to Cardiff before, and there are more patrol vessels around, so this actually might get hairy. This might get quite hairy. There's enough room to manoeuvre such that we might be able to avoid them. And basically my plan is get in, torpedo just the target that we need to torpedo, and then get the heck out of there. And what also might be useful is if I wait till night time, because that will further reduce visibility, and the motor torpedo boats that comprise most of the patrol craft that you'll find don't have hydro, I believe. I think it's corvette-sized ships and above. I could be wrong about that, though. Actually, one of the most hairy things I've done in the game so far was traversing the Straits of Gibraltar, where there are numerous Flower-class corvettes and Isles-class armed trawlers and MTBs and things. And yeah, that was interesting. Very interesting. That was a rather tense experience. Portsmouth, understandably, I think that's one of the main, if not the main, Royal Navy base in England. They've got, I still think it's odd they've got Portsmouth and not Exeter, but whatever. That was also very, very heavily defended in terms of patrol craft, so this is going to be tricky. I really wish I'd been able to catch this in open waters, because attacking it in one of the better defended ports is it's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting. So we don't quite have all hands to battle stations. We'll actually send him. That's my mechanic, who we've had him playing cards to keep up crew morale or crew discipline, and now that we're not doing that, it will start to drop a little bit, especially so when we get into action stations. But his primary job is warming up the torpedoes. Torpedoes sometimes will just be duds, regardless of what you do. But if you haven't warmed up the torpedoes, there is also an extremely good chance that they will not function correctly, that they will fail to detonate and kill the target that you want to kill. So having them available in order to go through the process of warming up the torpedoes, and of course also then loading the tubes once they've been fired, it's quite important. A lot of the time they tend to be the officer I use to do the various odd jobs around the ship, like go and switch on the bilge pump and such like, or flip the snorkel up and down, or maybe stick them on the radio for a while if the technician officer is needed for the hydro. Yeah, when it comes to actual combat, however, they are extremely important. So we are close enough now that it's not letting me do that much time compression, unlike, say, Kerbal Space Program. I keep mentioning Kerbal. It's not really a very similar game at all, but unlike Kerbal, in this instance, although there does seem to be variable levels of time compression, you, the player, don't get to control that. Which is, I guess that's fine. It kind of makes sense in the context of this game. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of try and swing round a bit in this sort of course, rather than just make a beeline and then have to do some kind of awkward turnaround this way, or God forbid, reverse and do a 3-point turn, which is not the most elegant maneuver in a submarine. Just like, surface ships, you have to think about your direction of travel and the fact it takes time to turn around and all that jazz. And unlike, say, World of Warships, you can't just slap something in an equipment slot that improves your rudder response time or any such thing like that. And we do have multiple noise contacts, rather inaccurately placed. That one's in the middle of Wales somehow. Yeah, but that means there will be multiple small groups of patrol craft around the place that I need to worry about. And at the moment we're still quite unspotted, and in fact once it gets a bit closer I will drop the snorkel, and that will reduce our visibility down to about 3 or 4%. We've got light cloud cover, but it is otherwise broad daylight. there is quite a variety of weather conditions in this game, up to including thunderstorms and also heavy fog, which can severely limit visibility. And sometimes it can work for you, but it can also work against you. However, I mean, in conditions like thunderstorms or whatever, you can just go down to periscope depth and rely more on the hydrophones, and that can actually be quite beneficial when you're attacking convoys under those circumstances. You don't think you get readings as fast as when you are actually surfaced and you have officers using the deck observation post, the conning tower observation post, but it's still, you know, if they don't know you're there, you can basically take all the time in the world to calculate all the targeting solutions that you need, because this is one of the definitely the more gamey aspects of this game. The game does not require you to recalculate courses for your torpedoes ever. You basically have your crew, or else kind of sort of do it yourself, calculate the targeting solution, and that's it, it's done. Once it's at whatever you decide to, you can do it all the way up to 100%, or you can, fire at lower percentages than that if you want. If you fire at 80%, you're still going to hit most of the time. If they start changing course, changing speed, trying to take evasive action, you've still got that 100% lock on. So yeah, that's definitely one of the slightly less realistic elements of this game. But I can see why they've done it that way, if you were constantly having to recalculate course and speed. But it also means there isn't particularly a penalty if you do get spotted. I have on occasion attacked convoys from the surface, because they don't have any escorts, and you are completely free to do that. And if you are spotted, of course they do start to take evasive action, but so long as you can get them going in a straight line for long enough, then you can still hit them. You can also attack with the deck gun, that's also a thing. If I go out of map view, you'll be able to actually see it there. You get an 88mm deck gun, which is a rather familiar weapon to anyone that's played World of Tanks. But it's only really useful for finishing off already damaged ships. It's not particularly useful as a primary means of attack, which is, I guess, pretty much how it would have been in real life. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know that they maybe were able to use the deck gun more offensively at times than you can in this game. This guy's still happily hanging out on deck, by the way. Don't ask me what's happened with his face. It's just, I don't know. Early access. It's early access, you guys. And oh boy, does it show. So we've got a lot of the crew resting at the moment. We'll have him start warming up torpedoes. That is a thing you don't need. You don't get any benefit from assigning extra crew to, but once you start loading torpedoes, it goes from, I think, like the regular 100% with just the officer doing it to 300% to 500%. So it's absolutely worth assigning crew at that point. We can also swap over. I don't know if crew tiredness has any particular effect on the effectiveness of whatever task they're doing. It doesn't seem to list any particular malus for having a tired officer do something. But if it does, then it would sort of make sense for a tired officer to be less good at doing things. So calculating a targeting solution would take longer, or such like. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that could be in the game that isn't. Nobody's ever going to. The only way machinery can get broken, for instance, is through being attacked. You're never going to have problems with somebody accidentally breaking the engine or nothing. Stuff like that just doesn't happen, which it might do at some point. They might decide to add stuff like that. We do have some warships here. Corvette, that's actually a bit scary. I've never encountered a destroyer in the wild. I've only seen a destroyer in port, so they're actually comparatively rare. But yeah, corvettes carry lots of depth charges. Now, it's possible for a ship chasing you, at least in theory, to run out of depth charges. So, you know, even a small ship like that is a significant threat just because they have a lot of depth charges. Something like a motor torpedo boat only has, I think, 4 depth charges. So they're a lot less bothersome in that regard. But something like this is, yeah, that's kind of scary. So what we're going to do is we are going to pop down the snorkel, which is going to put us over to battery control. So we'll then also put the blue lighting on, which will reduce our oxygen consumption. I looked it up, by the way. The red lighting, I mentioned earlier on, I wasn't sure if the red lighting does anything, but it actually gives a better vision range for your crew at night. And we'll also turn off the gyro compass, which is one of the items on the ship that produces noise. So we'll reduce our noise profile and therefore our sonar detectability by a bit. So it just basically will actually drop speed as well, because if you're going too fast you also get cavitation effects. So we'll speed this up a little bit. I'm not sure why you're not... He's fully rested. He should just now be into a mode of warming up all the torpedoes. They mostly do things automatically, but sometimes not. Like, that's his assigned kind of role, so theoretically he should just automatically be warming up all the torpedoes at this point. It might be he'll switch over to it once... I mean, we are actually at alarm status at the moment, so theoretically he should be. Let's stick you on the radio so we can actually send reports. This is how you earn currency in this game, by the way, is you do the tasks, and even sending reports for things, it earns you... extra budget, basically, which you then spend on replenishing your ship and on various upgrades. So we're looking for an Empire Bell. There we go, that is an Empire Bell. We need to get close enough. Now this is going to be a bit... Oh, this is... I really hope that's not the one, because we need to get, because my god, that would involve taking us right into the harbour. I mean, all the sailing down here is fine, because this is all within the assigned patrol area, and it all counts towards the 2500 km travelled. We might... I'm going to drop a save at this point, actually. This might be extremely inadvisable to actually try and get this bonus part of the current assignment. We'll see if there are any other... oh, it's an Empire Tower that we're after, not an Empire Bell. Oh, also, yep, don't click the game when it's saving. It doesn't like that. At least it has properly saved. I have encountered a bug where it looks like it's saving and then it just sits there and it's not. And the game is then running in the background. Right, Empire Tower, that's the one we want. So actually we do have a straight shot down at that. So what we do is we go and select that. And we, I guess, want to put ourselves around here, and so therefore the torpedo will be able to turn and run in to the port and strike the Empire Tower. Now the smaller class of cargo ship, the NA1, is that one of them? That's a corvette. Small ships generally take 1 torpedo, bigger ships take 2. And it just seems to be a hard-coded thing. Very occasionally I've sunk larger freighters with just a single torpedo. It seems like there's an element of RNG involved. But generally speaking, you will need 2 torpedoes to strike the larger ships in order to fully sink them. Sometimes sinking can take a while. We'll see what happens with this particular ship, although we won't really be able to hang around and watch, to be honest. I think we'll need to just hightail it out of there ASAP once we have gotten our torpedoes away. But yeah, that's kind of presuming that we don't get any duds, though, and that we do perfectly strike the target. Because even with a 100% firing solution on a stationary target, sometimes torpedoes miss. And there seems to be a slight element of RNG in there as well. Not a heavy one, but I have had that happen a couple of times with a disabled ship or a stationary ship with a 100% targeting solution, and somehow the torpedo still misses. And it's a little bit frustrating if you're down to your last couple of torpedoes. In fact, the worst one I had was... actually, I don't think it was against... Oh no, one of the targets was stationary, but it was a convoy I encountered, and I think something like 2 out of 6 torpedoes only actually hit, and the rest all managed to miss. Some of them were rather unfavourable firing angles, though. Because really what you want... and it's kind of hard to demonstrate when it's not a convoy of moving ships. The only ships we have at the moment are stationary. But you want to be able to fire a torpedo that is going to strike perpendicular to your target. If you're firing at a much more slanted angle, then there's a much higher chance. I mean, it becomes a smaller target that you're firing at, so it becomes a much higher chance that the torpedo will whiff past. And if you have a bow on or stern on target, then it's extremely easy to miss. So you always want that perpendicular target. Yeah, let's go up to second gear, as it were. It doesn't seem to matter, and again, this might be a very gamey thing. It really doesn't seem to matter which way your ship is actually pointed when you launch torpedoes. I don't think in real life they had... like torps have, you know, or had gyroscopes to ensure they're running in the correct direction. But I don't know if they were quite so dramatic as to be able to swing round in any direction, essentially, which you can basically do in this game. But we have a clear angle of fire. We should by this point have a decent targeting solution. We'll actually fast forward a bit further just so we have the best possible targeting solution, because we can afford to do that. Oxygen is something we need to keep an eye on, as is discipline, but otherwise we are okay at the moment. We are unspotted. And what I'll do is, because this is a stationary target, I will fire off multiple tubes at once. What I have found is with moving convoys, it's better to fire a single tube at a time, because once that first torpedo hits, it causes a hit animation which stops the ship, and that obviously, that just interruption for the animation of the torpedo hitting is just enough for then any subsequent torpedoes to miss generally. So I found it's most of the time beneficial to stagger your torpedoes, but usually you can afford to take the time to do that, because usually there aren't any escorts to worry about. But in this case, because we are close to a harbour and there are all kinds of escort ships around the place, that might be a problem. So we're flooding the tubes. We've got our target selected, and you have to make sure you have the right one selected, because if I was clicking on that, it would... I've had that once or twice where I've sent them at the wrong target, because it was... you know, I had the wrong target selected down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire those. And sadly, you don't quite get the full firing animation. It's a little bit, you know, like, that's one of these placeholder things at the moment. They just fly out the front. You don't get to see the torpedo doors, the tube doors opening or anything like that. And so what we can do is we can fast forward, and we can get basically the view from the ship itself, sat in harbour. We can get a view from the torpedoes as they whiz in, or you can just view it from above and see the torpedo tracks going in. So you've got multiple options. Now what we'll do is we'll start the engines going forwards on our escape track, and if these don't strike true, we have a stern launcher as well that we can use. So we'll for these purposes we'll take a look at the ship sat in dock. This is the only Empire tower. Occasionally you'll get one of these, Sync X type of ship, and you'll get 2 of them in a convoy. But I think it generally does mark them exactly for you, so it's not like you have to. Again, I almost feel that something like that's a bit too hand-holdy, that if you've got multiple ones, then you should have to kind of find out for yourself. But if you've only got limited torpedoes left, then that might actually be a bit unfair for you. This countdown, by the way, the verbal countdown doesn't always seem to be accurate, depending on... I don't know if it's whether you use time compression or not, but in this case, I think it should be roughly accurate. Oh, and there's a torpedo, and... Now this is the health bar. And boom. Right, now that's 2 torpedoes. That should be more than enough. Yep, sunk. So that's how you definitely know that you've sunk whatever it is you want to sink, because you are able to send a report about it. This is going to alert all the patrol craft, however. So yeah, we need our chief engineer on the engines so that we can actually get the best possible speed, because the 4th and 5th speed settings are only unlocked by having different crew members on the or a crew assigned to the engineer. So yeah, they're all now in like full maximum alert, and for some reason we're running aground game, and now we're getting shot at game. Why did you run us aground game? So this is what happens if you get spotted on the surface. They shoot at you a lot, and now we have Short Sunderland coming to drop depth charges. Yeah, I don't know why the game decided it was going to run me aground, run me onto the shore, but it did. It did. Okay. So now everything's knackered. The engineers are desperately trying to fix things. There's water flooding in. Multiple crew are injured. The electrics are knackered. Basically, we're screwed. This is not how I was hoping to end this. And it's a good thing I dropped a save earlier on. I might have to come back and do this in my own free time. But for the purposes of this video, yeah, we'll just watch the pummeling take place. And everyone panicking. And I wonder if we can actually back off. I suspect the engines are completely knackered. We might even just be totally aground at this point. Oh, I tell you why. I tell you what might have happened. Why we suddenly turned into shore like that. Yeah, there's a torpedo net. Or an anti-submarine net. And clearly we ran into it and it forced us into the... Okay. So we needed to be a bit further out into the channel before we made that turn, apparently. Sometimes there is an option. There's like the hardcore mode of this game where you can only save in port. But that's just not a good idea at the moment. A, because the game is so buggy, and also because you will run into things like this where there are safe ways in and out of various places, but it can take some trial and error to actually find them. And there's even some of the ports. I mean, one of the places you can get assigned to is Bergen, and there is one very specific passage that you need to take up along this side and then up through the middle here to get to Bergen. And if you go any other way through any of these other passages, or if you get your direction a bit wrong, you run aground, and that's it. There is no anything that you can do at that point other than reload the game. There doesn't seem to be a system of tides in this game. Most games don't do tides, so it's not like you can just wait for high tide and float yourself off as you could have in real life. You just have to sit there and wait and wait, and nothing happens, and eventually you get bored and restart. Or go back to the last, this happened to me multiple times trying to get to Bergen for the first time. It's just trial and error. So yeah, I absolutely don't recommend that mode, because there are some very specific things that you could run afoul of that you then, you can't undo. So the crew is mostly dead at this point. There is an element of bomber crew. In fact, yeah, we seem to have just flooded out completely, even though we're on the shoreline. People could have just gone out on deck. I wonder if it considers us to be... No, it does consider us to be on the surface. So it's not like the crew will all run out on deck or anything like that. They'll just stay in the ship and die. But it is possible to have a message pop up. And if there's any surviving crew whatsoever, if you lose the ship, then it'll say, oh, so-and-so was rescued. Or X number of sailors were rescued. But it's not like bomber crew where you can then put them on another ship. It's at that point just a matter of restart. In this case, we had a bunch of people that were captured and also a couple of casualties. So, yeah, that's U-boats, and I ran into a thing, and it wasn't even a bug, it was just me not knowing that there was an anti-submarine net there, and that's why I saved, and so I will go and finish this later. But, yeah, for now, for what it is, despite the jankiness, there is a playable game here. It's maybe not got the most content, and it is subject to change, but I've been kind of enjoying it, and I've been enjoying that mix of not boredom exactly, but these long stretches of not a lot happening, and then suddenly whammo, everything happening at once. And it makes for an interesting mix. And unlike Bomber Crew, which does... I mean, this isn't the case for everybody, but Bomber Crew, for me, just throws too much at me at once. FTL is fine because you can actually pause FTL, and there is no limit to that. Whereas Bomber Crew, it gives you a slowdown mechanic, but not a genuine full pause. And it only lasts for a very limited amount of time. And it has to recharge before you can use it again. And so inevitably when I play Bomber Crew, I just get frustrated and end up losing a lot of crews and then don't want to play it anymore. But that doesn't really seem to be the case with U-Boat. You can pause things if you need to. And it does seem a bit like Bomber Crew in that it doesn't genuinely seem to 100% pause. It just makes the game run very, very slowly, but you can do it for as long as you need to, which is a huge difference. So that's U-Boat. You can check this out on Steam if you find it interesting, and there's also going to be obviously far more other content than mine besides on YouTube and Twitch and places, so you can go and check out more elsewhere if you are interested and want to see a bit more gameplay. But for now, that's it for this video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it, found it interesting, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down below. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.